The Agenda in the Summer with Nam Kiwanuka is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
Beaches, cottages, picnics, and barbecue. Summer gatherings include good food, and here in Ontario, delicious and culture meet a vast world of culinary possibility. That's what we'll dish about all week with Chef Joseph Shawana, author and chef Joshna Maharaj, author and journalist Anne Huey, and food writer Marie Fitrion. Tonight, food as nutrition or fun. That's next on The Agenda in the Summer.
When I was younger in schools, they used to have like pizza lunches and even just like hot dog lunches. And that was like the thing that I lived for. I think there's this idea that if you eat at home, you're getting a more nutritious meal as opposed to going out.
Right.
So is it more nutritious to eat at home, Joseph?
We do, just because of my busy schedule, and we do a lot of takeout, actually. So
you're a chef and you do a lot of takeout.
Yeah,
I love that.
Most chefs do.
Yeah. You're too busy.
Yes.
Yeah, and then most chefs will actually just prefer just opening up a bag of ramen and crushing it and then eating it that way, right? So,
true.
But
do you like your own food? Do you like eating your own food?
Not necessarily. My wife always just said, "Aren't you going to eat? Aren't you going to eat?" I was like, "No," kind of thing. But my son loves my food. My wife loves my food. I'll eat my food just because it's I made it and I know exactly what went in it.
Yeah.
But my son and my wife, they eat phenomenal food. My son will just eat like and everybody looks at him, and especially when we go out, like when we went out to Paris with a whole group of us and one of my chef buddies there, who might not actually like what I mentioned about Michelin earlier, but
right,
because he's won 2 stars,
right.
So
and he's guarding and appreciating them, sure.
But he actually appreciates the way my son eats because he loves his steak blue rare, and he's
what does that mean, blue rare?
It's like quickly seared,
yes.
Seared, just still raw but nice and warm in the middle. So he loves his steak that way. So he knows how to eat, and he loves food. Now that he broke his leg, so now he's eating more food. Right, so because he can stay at home, but at his school now, and I got to applaud them for this because they started a hot foods program.
Wonderful.
Where a local catering company will actually supply the classes with on Mondays and Tuesdays with Mondays and Wednesdays with hot meal programs for the kids. So he's getting really good food on both ends. And we try to pack him a good lunch with different types of snacks, different varieties. My wife always says I pack too much food for him.
Yeah. But he eats it all?
Yeah, well, I know how he eats, and he eats little bits and pieces of this, right?
Yeah.
If I just gave him a couple things in his lunchbox, he probably wouldn't eat it because it'll probably look too boring.
We always talk about like food as being nutritious, but if you're just kind of eating it on the go, is it really? Yeah.
I think it depends on where you're eating, but you're right. I mean, in general, and Joseph, you touched on this, if you're cooking it yourself, then you know what's going into it. You know exactly what you're preparing and exactly what you're putting into your body, and I think that that's really important to a lot of people. There's also the affordability issue, which is huge right now, you know, beyond food costs and restaurant prices obviously going up in relation to that. You know, all of our costs are going up. Our mortgages, our rent, our transportation costs, everything is going up. And so I think for a lot of people, eating out is one thing that they're having to step back from a little bit more and trying to save on those costs with their own food.
Because I guess eating out also maybe gives you a different experience. When COVID happened, you all had to pivot and still create that kind of eating out atmosphere at home, right? Is that a part of it, like having a different experience if you eat out?
I think so. I mean, I know it's a bit of a novel, like it's no big deal now, but right before COVID hit, we were doing these supper club series every month. And so we'd have people come into our space and they would all eat together. And COVID hit, and we had to cancel one that was scheduled for like the 24th of March or whatever. In my previous life, I worked essentially I was in charge of what would now become Microsoft Meets. And so I was like, well, why don't we just deliver all these meals, and then we'll just all have a Zoom meal together. Like, that's not a big, like, now it's been done, but I just remember being like, let's do this. And, you know, to my knowledge, one of the first to do it, and everyone loved the idea of all getting together and eating a meal together digitally and enjoying that same meal together and talking about it. So COVID did change sort of our restaurant experience. Of course, everything became delivery, everything came home. And we also lost something on the way culinary-wise as well. Because I know my partner, he loved plating. Like, that's his big thing. He really likes creating like a really beautiful plate. And it's hard to do that in an aluminum tinfoil, right? It's hard.
That's got to go in a bag on the back of a dude on a bike who's navigating traffic, right?
You know, and there's foods that just don't translate well that way, as well as now you're also relying on the end user to finish the cooking, which is always a little scary, right? It's just kind of like, don't overcook it, and like it's already like follow the instructions, or in delivery where it's I'm delivering it, but ultimately it's going to degrade a little bit on the way home.
Why is presentation so important?
Because we eat with our eyes first.
Eat with our eyes, yes.
No question, right? We eat with our eyes, a beautiful thing. There is definitely a little when you crack open right, a like sweaty, soggy clamshell of cereal.
The burger's gonna
can imagine how awesome it was half an hour ago, right? Right.
You mentioned, you know, when you cook at home, you know the ingredients, you know what it is that you're putting in your meal. So if it's more nutritious to eat at home, why do people dine out?
Convenience, right? They don't have a lot of time, especially now where they have to work harder to make just as much money as they did last year, even more, like less because of inflation. They just don't have the time. I would take it just to cook at home. I always have this plan. Every single week, we go shopping, usually on Sundays. I buy a bunch of groceries. I'm going to cook this and make sure that my wife and my son have good meals, and just got to reheat this, reheat that. I maybe did that once, right? So, and then the rest is just like, I'll get chicken. I'll get like 3 whole chickens or something. And I'll butcher them up at home. I'll keep the bones and stuff. And then I'll put the bones in the freezer. Now I got like a lot of bones.
A freezer full of bones.
Yeah. So it's just like the whole mentality of just trying to find that time to cook at home. It's very difficult. And I had this life growing up where we all ate at the table. My wife's family all ate at the table.
Right.
But now it's just like everybody's sitting in front of their TVs and eating, right?
In front of their phones.
In front of their phones or TVs and stuff. But it's usually more convenient that way because as a chef, I eat very fast. Like it's just like it goes on a plate and it just goes in my mouth.
Do you think that's from being one of a number of kids? And I've heard that, right, from my pals who have many siblings. It's like you got to get there. Or somebody else is going to take it out, right?
True story.
I've heard this a lot. Me and my brother, it was cool, right? It was fine.
I'm a fast eater and an only child, so I have no idea how that happened, but like...
No, we would steal meat from my brother's plate. Because he was such a slow eater. We'd be like, Brian, look over there. And then he'd look over there and be like, And then he started, he got onto us. So when he sat down, he would actually take the meat and lick it.
Nice.
And you're like, it's okay.
Claimed. Yes.
I think for me, it's about being present. I come from a blended, we have a blended family. My stepdaughter, when they do come to visit, I don't want to be in the kitchen cooking, or my partner doesn't want to either. So, for us to all be together at the table, talking and really being immersed in a conversation requires somebody else to be cooking, whether it's we're ordering it in or we're going to a restaurant. Not having to deal with that little piece allows us to kind of be present with each other, enjoy that meal, but at the end of the day, we can just kind of walk away from the mess and leave and go home and do our thing.
And I wanted to ask you that same question. If it's more nutritious to eat at home, why do people eat out?
For me, it's about the experience, right? I mean, maybe not so now because I have a 3-year-old at home and we've just gone through this pandemic thing. But, 10 years ago, I used to be one of those people who would go out to eat. It was a form of entertainment. It was, it's a new experience. So if I'm traveling, for instance, I would like to plan out what restaurants I would want to go to in advance. Buying a meal in a new city is a pretty low entry way of gaining access to, you know, what this place is about, you know, being able to talk to people who live in the city. It's a way of being a part of, you know, something bigger than yourself. And, you know, as much as we've kind of talked about Michelin stars and talked about, you know, how in a lot of ways that system is not relevant anymore, but I used to seek out Michelin-starred restaurants myself. You know, sometimes you want to have that kind of special occasion. Sometimes you want to have a crisp white tablecloth. Sometimes you just want to be taken care of.
All the tweezered food.
Yeah, so I think that's a big part of it. But again, like, life kind of shifts and evolves. I'm not in a stage of my life now with a very young child and busy work where I want to be going to a loud restaurant necessarily, where I want to be standing in line, where I want to have to shout over somebody in order to be heard. Not interested, but I think it's an experience, right? And it's something that obviously people are drawn to.
There's also, I think, we need to broaden our thinking about the role of restaurants, right? I don't think that restaurants exclusively exist to feed us when we don't care to cook at home, right? I think that there are many cultures in the world that rely on restaurants for their everyday food, right? In fact, I visited my brother who lives in Bangkok and discovered that many apartments are being sold without kitchens in them, right? And the whole point is that when you get off the train at the end of the day, you turn a corner and there's this glorious scenario of Thai aunties, right, who have this beautiful food that is made with all their love and care, but the rice is already bagged up and the hot sauce is all, you know what I mean? And you just literally pick this stuff up on your way home, right? Or I remember reading an article about Chinese families and how it's just standard. There are things that you eat that in restaurants that other people cook and the things that you just don't cook at home. And that's like, my family was the same. I don't have a tandoor, right? If I want to eat tandoori food, I got to go out. And that's like in India, that's the way that, you know what I mean? It's like where people understand that restaurants play this role to kind of supplement, right?
It's kind of like an extension of your home.
Yeah, right? And you go to eat special things there because they cook things there that maybe you don't get. Or Friday nights are restaurant night, and it's when everybody gets together. I don't think restaurants are just substitutions for when we don't cook for ourselves. I think there's a role. And the pandemic told us that, right? Because neighborhood restaurants had to pivot and change a little bit to serve their little, they started just making burgers and sandwiches instead of the fancy things, you know, fine dining things, because it's restaurants can serve communities in this way.
And people gallivanted, like communities came together to support restaurants. Marie, I saw you now.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I'm like, there are things that I will never make out. Like, I love oxtail.
Totally.
I don't have the millions of years to make it properly. I'm going to a restaurant. Someone's slaving over that for themselves.
Sushi's
for me.
like that. I can do it,
not
but
making
man,
it.
I don't need to. Like,
Super high.
Someone else has figured that
with the
out.
drag, like all that. Seriously.
That's why I have a hard time with breakfast. I will make my own eggs. But there are foods that absolutely need to exist out there for someone else to make for us.
Yeah, as a chef, it must be nice to hear that, like, you know, restaurants are not just places to go to.
I'm taking it all in right now.
But, you know, it's been a hard time for restaurants and catering companies during the past few years.
Yeah.
In what ways have you had to, I guess, I don't want to use the word, I'll just use it once, pivot during this?
Well, everybody pivoted right throughout the whole thing. Didn't matter what you did, especially in every single sector across the world. Restaurants and tourism, like, they really took a big hit. Right? A lot of people got to work from home. Chefs couldn't work from home, right? So we had, especially the ones that owned their own place. That was their bread and butter. That's what kept their lights on at home. So they really had to switch their focus and, like you said, how to serve their community. And the community now that those restaurants are in, they're paying them back by going back and supporting them while they're open, fully open now. So it's and you really got to know the chefs and the owners of those places, because they had to be there, right?
Yes.
They couldn't afford to.
You saw their faces literally spreading mustard on sandwiches and baking the pies and whatever.
They couldn't pay anybody, right? So you got to know those chefs, and that's the biggest. I think that's the biggest misconnect between the guest and the chef, right? Is a lot of people in a lot of places, they don't know the chef behind the curtain. It's like the Wizard of Oz, right? So they don't know the person behind the curtain. unless you go to like a really good restaurant, especially a sushi restaurant, where it's just only one sushi chef, and you sitting there and you're talking to them, and you can see them making it, and there's that connection, right? And you have a different experience, and I think that's the shift to where restaurants need to go, is opening their kitchens back up. Right? Yeah.
Marie?
As a catering company, it was odd because we didn't do corporate catering. We did a wedding catering. We did event catering. So essentially, our business became illegal overnight. You couldn't have groups.
It's the gathering was the problem.
The gathering was the issue, and so it was odd to be taking jobs in other places. We were owner operators, jobs in other places outside of catering, and just waiting, being like, okay, are the rules lifted this summer? Am I doing 20 weddings, or am I waiting until next year? And that just kept happening.
Yeah.
That pressure must have been immense.
It was immense, and it was very difficult to sort of plan things out, because when you did get another job, and we ended up leaving the catering world, and it was difficult to sort of say, like, listen, I'm all in for this job, but however, I do have 12 weddings this summer. Right. Every weekend is booked, so if you could just give me some time, and just, having good communication with your customers, explaining to them the situation. The supply chain issue was hard. Hey, I know I put this on your menu 3 years ago, but it's now doubled in price and it's no longer available. These conversations were really, really difficult to have, and for the most part, I think most clients are understood. I think the hardest part was actually seeing all the chefs and all the servers leave the industry. Who was left when all these events needed to be executed? Who was left in the industry? And a lot of amazing, amazing people in the industry had left. And I think that made things really hard too. And I'm sure that restaurants obviously felt it as well. But when you're executing a wedding, you need 12 really great chefs at the helm all at once. And if there's only 5 of them, you're filling in those blanks with other people, and it's a lot harder to do.
Well, you mentioned servers, people who we know are not really, because customers can be not very nice, not very
challenging,
kind, very challenging. Do you think that there's a class element when it comes to working in the food industry versus being a guest in the industry, a client in the industry?
Yes. Yes, definitely. Definitely. Especially because, particularly when we think about servers and front of house, it is the job that people do while they're trying to do something else. Right. Right? And listen, a large part of that is because it is potentially not a secure enough job for you to have to sustain you. So it's the in the meantime job when you want to be an actor or some other thing like that. Right? And so...
But for some people, that is their job.
For some people, it really is. For some people, it really is. But it is, it's so tricky. The margins are so tight, and the security is so threadbare, right? And I don't know, Joseph, you tell me, we're all cooks. There was a moment during the pandemic where I was like, what are we doing here? What, you know what I mean? Now that the table has been upended and all the circumstances that we were figuring out to work within have been completely eliminated, it's like, why did we do this? It cannot be, right? It cannot be for the money, right? There are way smarter, easier ways to make money in this world than do this.
Do you have an answer?
Right? My God, right? And it is because our guts are involved in this. We love this work, right? I say to my students, if you have a major dinner service, cater whatever it is, and you are exhausted, and the dishes are done and whatever, and you're ready, you know what I mean, really ready for sleep. But if at that moment you are cool with the idea that you're gonna pull a board and a knife out and do it all over again, then you know this is the right place for you, right? Because it doesn't work if it's just purely business, right? It does, our hearts and our guts are the grout, you know what I mean? Between all the bricks there. We do this because so many people are like, I am a cook. I don't know any other way to engage with the world besides this, right?
So on that, I was watching chefs sort of have that existential crisis of what am I and who am I when I'm not a chef?
That's right.
I've got 3 years where I'm not quite doing this at the same caliber. I'm not able to do this how I want to do it. Then who am I in that world? That's really, really hard. If essentially your career is on hold until the world gets back to it again.
Well, Joseph, Joshna directed it to you too. The why?
The why. Right? That's the biggest question that a lot of chefs have is, why am I still here after
It's
3
amazing
years
that
of
we're
nothing?
not even fully sure. I guess our way it shifts, right?
I think it's just the love and passion. You have to love it, right? So, and the chefs that remained till this day who are still running their places, you know that they love their establishment. I knew I'm very fortunate that I knew that this was a career that I always wanted to do, and at the time I didn't even think of it as a career. It's just what I do, right? So
It's just who you are.
it's just who I am, right? I'm a chef, right? So, yeah, right. So.
I love that for you. but on the point of serving,
Yeah.
I've served in the past. I've worked as a server in a restaurant. I've worked as a cater waiter. I was a flight attendant for a while. Like I have done those jobs. And so to answer your question, absolutely, there's absolutely a class element. You know, there are many, at least in my experience, quiet indignities that you have to kind of grin and bear when you do that kind of work. And it is hard work. And I think that many of the people who work, at least on the serving side, do it because they have to. And so, given the realities of the pandemic and the restrictions that were in place and just the fact that so many went away from that work makes me think that something needs to change, because obviously either the work is too hard, they're not getting compensated, you know, enough for the work, whatever it is. Maybe people aren't willing to compensate that kind of labor. I don't know what it is, but something is obviously
It's a lack of
broken
balance
there
too, right?
Yeah.
It's like it's hard having a family. So it's like every weekend, every evening. Like it was me and my partner doing it. And I was like, well, then who's with the kids?
Who's taking care of
You know, it was like every weekend my kids can't go somewhere, and this just isn't working. And when they were babies, it was one thing, but now they're in school. So we really had to like reframe like what is important to us. And for me, it meant like I'm stepping away from this piece. I'm gonna still work with food. You know, I write about it. I help other entrepreneurs launch their food businesses, and that's my contribution. And my partner still gets to be a chef, but we just can't do it together at the same time anymore.
We have about 2 minutes left, and we've spent a whole week speaking to you all, and I just wanted to give you an opportunity, 30 seconds each. Any final thoughts that you wanted to share about food and culture? Joshna.
I think that there is a beautiful opportunity for all of us to reconnect to food and thus reconnect to each other, right? I think that I tell young people who I work with all the time, you are supposed to be able to completely trust your relationship with your food. That should be a solid, nourishing, you know what I mean, love-filled connection, ideally, right? We understand many things stand in the way of that. But I want to encourage people to remember that the magic of the kitchen and the table is still very much alive, right? And pandemic showed us, you know, that 9-year-olds can take care of Wednesday night dinner quite competently and all those sort of sweet things. But just know that if you feel like something's missing, you know what I mean, life, there's an empty space, get around the table with some people, get in the kitchen with some people. Like, trust that nourishes you beyond just filling the tank is the thing.
Joseph?
Sorry, my mind drifted a bit. I was just listening to what Joshua was saying and just went into la la land.
Nice.
In terms of just like food, just learn what's around you, right? So if you really want to enjoy food, learn the history of where that food comes from. And that's something I tell my students is if they're really, really surprised on how, because I try to do a lot of research and I try to share as much knowledge as I can of indigenous food systems in North America, but I only know so much. I only know as much as the person is going to tell me, right? Or whatever a book says. And even then, it's just a one-sided conversation. So I got to dig in a little bit more. So I learn more about food, and I try to share as much as I can with the students, and of where their food comes from and how it paved the way for indigenous food and indigenous history in North America. So, and I just tell them, I was like, if you want to go out for dinner, don't go to a fancy restaurant. Go to like a mom and pop place, right? Because that's where real food is from. That's where you can actually learn a lot from. Especially if you want to go to an authentic restaurant, go to a small little kiosk, right? So like we love going to Pacific Mall and just going upstairs and getting some noodles and stuff because you can get everything there, like a lot of stuff. So, and my son loves noodles. Like he'll just scoop them up, and he's really happy now that he learned how to use chopsticks and a spoon and stuff. So he's getting that cultural significance of being a Torontonian, right? So of learning your neighbors, of knowing your neighbors, and getting along. And then one of those ways is through food.
And Marie?
I think, we say things like you learn to walk a mile in someone else's shoes. I think it's also learn to cook in someone else's kitchen, Going back to what Joshna was saying, I think it's really beautiful, this idea of cooking together. One of the things, I'm actually in the midst of moving right now, but one of the things I want to do more of is cook with my kids and cook with my family, which I couldn't do in a cramped little kitchen, but I'm looking forward to getting those step stools and really sharing, recipes from my culture and making sure that the kids have access to that as well, and cooking with my partner and really, creating that bounty together and reframing how we connect with food as a family.
And Anne?
I think what brings it all home for me is that why all of this matters, why all of these conversations, this conversation that we're having right now about, how we talk about food, how much we educate ourselves on different cultures and histories of people and the people behind our food, why that all matters is that all has real-world consequences, in that how we think about different cultures' foods affects how much we're willing to pay for that culture's food. It affects how much we're willing to compensate those people behind the labor. And so if we're talking about a certain cuisine or a certain culture's food as being rustic or hole-in-the-wall restaurant versus refined and authentic versus, elevated, whatever, what have you, all of that stuff has real-world consequences in terms of the people behind the food. And so I think this discussion is really, really important.
With that, thank you so much. It's been an honor and a privilege to spend this time with you. Really do appreciate all of your insights. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our guests all this week were Joseph Shawana, Executive Chef at Kokum on Manitoulin Island; Joshna Maharaj, Chef and author of Take Back the Tray; Anne Huey, reporter at the Globe and Mail and author of Chop Suey Nation; and food writer Marie Fitrion, who's also program manager at the nonprofit Foodpreneur Lab. Next week, we're going to the movies on The Agenda in the Summer.
The Agenda in the Summer with Nam Kiwanuka is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
With thousands of in-depth interviews and discussions, The Agenda's YouTube channel delivers context for virtually any topic you're interested in. Check out our latest videos and playlists at youtube.com/theagenda. And make sure to hit the subscribe button to get notified about all our new conversations. It's all available at youtube.com/theagenda.
The Agenda in the Summer with Nam Kiwanuka is back on TVO, TVO.org, and other TVO streaming channels. Earth's great rivers, from